And so, yeah, I can understand why tabloids might run something like this, but the world's at a precipice. We're at a decision point. And the investment math, the science is all behind climate change, stopping climate change. And one country is not going to be able to make much of a difference, as we now have 4 countries out there who are net positive.
Want to welcome to the Actionable ESG Talks series brought to you by AKFI, the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first non-profit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. The Actionable ESG Talk series brings together great minds to discuss the current state and the future of ESG, sustainability, AI, and digital transformation. I'm delighted to be here with our guest, Gabriel Toomey. Hello, Gabriel.
Very nice to be here again. Thank you, Manuel.
Just want to introduce quickly our speaker today. Mr. Toomey is an award-winning sustainable finance research manager who has worked for over 20 years as sustainable finance research manager, advising more than 200 corporations, NGOs, and governments. He has led the deployment of more than $3 billion in sustainable finance. He is a member of various scientific and financial technical committees, including the S&P Sustainable Finance Scientific Council, well-published author of over 100 thematic investment reports addressing sustainability. So frequent global speaker, over 100 events in the past 3 years alone. He is also a teacher. He taught at a professor at Johns Hopkins University since 2016. Political appointee to various Washington, D.C. I'm not going to hold it against him. Regional Urban Planning and Climate Advisory Commission advising on climate change, environment, energy, and air quality issues impacting over 5.5 million people. Former Herb Institute, NSH MBA, and consortium fellowship recipient. So welcome again. And without further ado, but now, if I look inside this picture, I see large companies. US has over 70%, for instance, of the investments in the stock markets, right? So large companies from US pose for international, operating internationally, many of them, Google, Tesla, let's say, just to pick up two almost randomly. Those companies will have to continue to comply with the requirements in the European Union, in Asia, in China, for instance, right? We always think China is sort of not following the aggressively, actually, the decarbonization, the better environmental acts, and so on. When you look at that, it's clearly the push from the industries will sort of be not in line with the push from the administration, because the administration can say, well, leave the Paris Agreement, but when you operate in Europe, you'll have to meet the carbon, the double materiality, all the other standards under the CSRD framework. So I can see a tension between the industries in the US, the major companies in the US, their international presence, and the need to continue to comply.
That's correct. I mean, one way of thinking about this, if I'm an international corporation in the United States, which even though we're small, we're about 33 people, we're still an international corporation. We have a US headquarters, we have 5 people here in Europe, we have team members that travel, and most of our business, even though it's been dollar denominated, has been outside the United States. And we're a startup. So do I say, as a CEO, can I tell my board, we're not going to work in Europe? 530 million people, we're not going to go work in that market. We're not going to work in China. 1.5 billion people. That's impossible. And so business is a leveler here. And Europe is creating as a very clear set of criteria for a sustainability pathway going forward. And this is for the hard to abate sectors, right? We've had a lot of success on renewable energy. Now we're moving to agriculture supply chains and deforestation. There's efforts in transport, in maritime transport, and obviously in aviation. And we're seeing efforts around other hard to abate sectors around, such as petrochemicals, aluminum, and steel. And so in Europe, for example, we have companies like Hamina, which is here in Austria. They're the European leader for green aluminum. Aluminum on a per ton basis has between 19 to 27 metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. They have a green aluminum that they sell, it's at a premium, that has 2 tons.
Wow.
So the transition can occur. And so what happens is, that's when I talk about for 2025, it's getting dirty, it's getting our hands dirty, it's getting a shovel out, it's getting a paintbrush out. We're doing the work now. We're going to do the work of hope, and it's going to be hard work. We're going to stay focused on what needs to get done, because what we cannot have is 2 communities. Those with access to capital and access to the ability to transition to a net positive economy, and those who do not get that opportunity, who do not have that access. Simply because of a contagion. There's a contagion. People move and economies change. And when we look at the climate math, there are models that suggest that over 1 billion people, and when you're at 2 degrees Celsius, will live in regions that will be uninhabitable for all 12 months of the year. What happens with that 1 billion people? And right now, we need to understand that 2024, Manuel, and all your friends who are listening, is the coldest year left of our lives. Every year going forward is going to be warmer. Right now, we're at, depending on the math, because which agency is doing the analysis, not all governmental agencies have the same data sets. We're at 1.55 degrees Celsius or 1.62 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels for this year. This is the coldest year of the remaining years of our lives. So we have to adjust to that reality, and we have to work hard and get dirty and work together and collaborate in 2025.
So much for the tabloid saying, the cold era is coming back, The titles, right? You can see the titles. ESG is dead, sustainability is dead, or it's a hoax, or the journalists are very good to boast these images.
That's funny, because there are climate models where regions get colder, but the overall temperature in the atmosphere increases. And if we see a continued degradation of the circular current in the Atlantic, which is equivalent to our HVAC system for North America and Europe.
Sucks in.
Right? If that slows down due to increasing climate temperatures, which increase with the subsequently result in ocean acidification, and also result in meltwater of Greenland, which slows down and changes the composition of the Atlantic current, we could see a 9 degrees Fahrenheit decline in temperatures in Europe, while the rest of the world continues on to 2 and 3 degrees Celsius and more increase in temperature. And so Yeah, I can understand why tabloids might run something like this, but the world's at a precipice. We're at a decision point. And the investment math, the science is all behind climate change, stopping climate change. And one country is not going to be able to make much of a difference, as we now have 4 countries out there who are net positive.
Mm.
And so other people and institutions and organizations around the world are working to solve climate change, given the means that they have available. And so for us, as a consultancy, we want to accelerate this on their behalf. And there are many other organizations like ours who are working with clients all over the world.
We're also looking at the sustainability part of the supply chain, by the way, with AKFI. But my questions, I'll have 2 questions in one. One going in the direction of technology, the other maybe in the direction of what we should expect in terms of social impact. People move, basic human condition. We move to find food, we move to find shelter, and climate change brings a challenge to this, especially in underdeveloped and developing countries. So when you mention the changes in the climate, I can see migration of population, regardless of how much the legislators and the politicians say no or yes in Germany or in US, or this will happen naturally because pressure on populations. So that's one question, is how do you see the population being affected by exactly what you said about the changes in the climate as predicted by the models, or as shown by the models to be more accurate? And the other is about technology. Can it help? Blockchain, AI, and so on. So let's start with the first.
Well, the easy question is technology. There are technological solutions. What we need is wisdom on how to apply them to address climate goals. And, when we interview people to join our organization, we ask probably the most important question: are you humble and are you curious? And we need to approach technology in the same way. We want to use it, but are we humble and humble? We have humility around it and are curious. What is it going to teach us, and how can we collaborate and work with others with this technology? What we see now, the data centers are forecast to be 10% of our emissions profile by 2050, if not more.
Sure.
So we have, from a technology perspective, there are those who are considering our small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, SMRs, possible as a long-term base load energy source for clusters of data centers. It might be, right? I don't know. And I've covered nuclear on Wall Street. I covered nuclear. That was one of the areas I covered. Which is another conversation for another day. Now,
absolutely. And by the way, also large nuclear, the 3 Mile Islands will get restarted because Microsoft is investing in the restarting of the old facilities, large nuclear power.
Yeah.
Exactly supporting what you said. The energy will become a determining factor on how far and how fast we can go with AI.
That's correct. The criteria, the limiting factors on nuclear are the sources of fuel. There's not enough fuel. It's in complicated locations around the world. And then on safety and disposal.
Absolutely.
And with safety, we have significant issues around engineering that need to be solved and addressed. Some of it can be solved, and some of it's not. We're not able to solve, right? But there are solutions. The new nuclear reactors, for example, use 30% of the same quantity of parts as the ones in the 1970s. Okay. So you have less points of failure because you have less parts.
Sure.
On the social piece, we haven't solved this. The world has not come to terms that we cannot have 2 worlds. Those who go to Mars and live on their private
Yeah.
islands, and those who are able to, who suffer through the climate disaster and crisis with their own, inside their own community. Because people will move and there'll be frictions. And so that's where we have to understand, like for us, the for-profit part of our business is working with clients right in developed nations and in those circumstances. The not profitable part of our business is where we work for free or at significant discount with organizations in other regions, because all organizations around the world need to be able to do we need to partner with all of them on their transition to a net positive economy by 2050. You can't leave anybody out.
Absolutely. And when you project this image, to me, it's few versus many, right? Because the large underserved, if you want, populations are many. It's a large part of the humanity. And you cannot legislate major migrations. You can control borders, or you may think you can control borders, but that's a different picture than the one when you have a massive migration. I see the bison, and I think of how other forms of life migrate. You won't stop a bison migration.
Right.
And by the way, you mentioned responsible alpha. And one question in general, when we talk about sustainability, people say, oh, yes, it's about people and it's about the planet. And they forget about the most important P, which is the profit, or as important P, because you cannot link the profits and the planet without having a profitable enterprises. You started the conversation about the financial models, the impact financing, the green financing, the ESG financing. So any example, any case study, you mentioned many, so pick up one.
Yes, I'll be succinct and I'll pick up a couple if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Because they're in different regions. We have a client here in Central and Eastern Europe. And they do impact investing in renewable energy.
Okay.
Crowdsourcing. And this client offers 7.5% return on an annual basis for investing in solar panel installations for farms in Germany and Austria. And they're not for profit. Their minimum capital is 100 euros.
Wow.
Very good model. 7.5%. That's a very good rate of return.
Mm-hmm.
And they're transparent. One can actually see how the capital, if I give them money, goes from point A to point B. That's an opportunity. That's on the upside. Now, a way technology can help us, again, is we partnered with Deception and Data Truth Analysis.
Okay.
That name is DATA, D-A-T-A. We're the first consultancy in the world that does deception analysis at scale, where they had analyzed all the publicly traded documents, or most of the documents for publicly traded companies in the United States from 2006 to present, only looking at the words to see if there were lying and deception in the words. We use that process and screened 3 quarterly 10Qs, quarterly statements, and 1 annual report of an LNG, liquefied natural gas name in the United States, looking at 800 to 900 word fragments. Applying a bunch of complicated science, it's the work that we do. We were able to segment these over time and determine that there is a higher likelihood of deception or lying in the statements around the company's fast LNG deployment. We concluded that in 2022. This company is now facing a class action lawsuit because it was lying in that exact section of the report that our data scientists were able to highlight. So that's another case study. Finally, we're finished a book that we submitted under contract to the Inter-American Development Bank on the future of green bonds in Latin America. And we have a chapter on our website that one can read. This paper that we have on the LNG name is also on our website. And what we see there, we surveyed 60 asset managers around the world for specifically what they're doing in Latin America around green bonds and what they would advise issuers to do to increase the investment capital in the global north in Latin America, but also increase investment capital regionally in green bonds.
Very, very interesting. And I should mention maybe that LNG or natural gas from a environmental viewpoint, it's much more dangerous than emissions of cars of carbon, CO2, I should say, dioxide of carbon. And people usually talk only about, carbon reduction, but we should talk also about carbon reduction in the context of methane, ethane, the LNG. So very, very interesting case studies. Thank you. And I would like to dedicate a whole, session only to case studies because they are so important and also so illustrative of where we are. And it's the first time I hear about, by the way, about deception analysis. And I can see how AI, how technology can help analyzing this kind of large reports. I remember also going for AKFI through some of the reports practically manually, just with the search function and trying to figure out how many times in 50 pages you may mention terms which are associated with greenwashing. But now I think the trend is shifting and we're talking about green hashing. People are afraid of what you say. Companies are afraid of what you said, being sued. So now they don't want to report anything. And I think legislation, and maybe we dedicate a few more minutes to legislation and the future of legislation. And I want to close with recommendations for students and people in job transitions towards sustainability. So 2 questions in one again. Where do you see the legislation going, especially in Europe, in California, by the way, which is a large economy, the 5th in the world? And then maybe a question about but a question about the students and what would you recommend to people that want to transition to sustainability?
Well, the first question is pretty simple. California has SB 219 and the EU has CSRD. Sorry for speaking acronyms. These are required sustainability disclosure laws for corporations. So if I'm a corporation in the United States, am I not going to do business in California? Am I not going to do business in Europe? They're going to do their reporting. They don't might have much of a choice. They're going to have to do the reporting. So that's good. Because transparency is how you mitigate risk. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, as we know. Now, for the students and career changers, I would ask you to do the following. For students, we offer an unpaid internship. It's 30 hours. You're given one task, and you have to perform that at a professional level. We teach you how to do it. You can see we have 5 or 6 interns right now. Then if that task is completed, we can move on to the subsequent task. There are 2 training processes we have, one for analyst and one for manager in business development and operations. And interns choose one path for the first 2 or 3 30-hour sections, and then the subsequent path for the next sections. We have interns from all over the world. For career changers, it's key to think about using a values, interest, career, job model, the 4-layer cake. It's what I teach at Johns Hopkins. Values is the base layer. The second layer is interests. The third is careers. And the fourth is jobs. What I'd ask you to do is write out your values, then write your interests, your career, your job, and that will help you guide where you need to go. If you want to talk through that model, please reach out. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Gabriel. I hope you'll be back soon. I think we have a number of topics which would you like to discuss and cover. And to conclude, I want to thank our audience and to our listeners. And thank you again for all the good learning and good data you provided us and good models. And hope to see you soon again. And have a good holiday season. And see you soon.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.